If the laws of physics were different by even the tiniest fraction, life could not exist. Take the cosmological constant. This number controls how fast the universe expands. And if it were larger by just 1 part in 10 to the power of 50, physical matter would have never come together to form stars and galaxies. If it was smaller by that same tiny fraction, the universe would collapse in on itself. But somehow, this number, seemingly against all odds, lands perfectly in the narrow range where life can exist. But why? Philosophers and physicists have proposed several competing explanations, ranging from ideas of deeper, undiscovered physical laws, a multiverse, or that the universe was designed by a creator. Let's explore these theories and see whether any of them explain this remarkable fine-tuning of the universe. Fine-tuning is the idea that the universe is exceptionally well adjusted to create conditions suitable for life, and that the odds of the universe being this way are incredibly small, so small that it can't just be down to luck. So, is the universe really fine-tuned? Let's take a look. In science, there are many foundational rules that dictate how the universe operates. These range from the masses of fundamental particles like quarks, the strength of fundamental forces like gravity, and the value of various physical constants like the speed of light. All of these things have a number assigned to them, and we don't really know why they have these values. We don't know why the speed of light is 3 times 10 to the power of 8 meters per second. It just is. And it seems if you change these fundamental rules by any significant amount, it would cause such drastic changes that the universe would be left a wasteland, devoid of any living organisms. And you might think surely life would figure out a way to develop even in a universe of totally different laws of physics. But this really doesn't seem to be the case. For example, take the mass of quarks, a fundamental particle that makes up the protons and neutrons in atoms. There are 2 types of quarks, known as down quarks and up quarks, each with their own mass. We don't know why they have the specific masses they have, but we do know that if the mass ratio between these 2 kinds of quark was changed by as little as 2%, atoms would no longer be able to form. Think about that. Just a 2% difference, and there wouldn't even be atoms. And if we know anything, we know that life would not be able to exist if this were the case. So that's pretty crazy on its own, but it doesn't stop there. Another classic example of this fine-tuning is the cosmological constant, as I mentioned at the start of the video. If this constant had been ever so slightly different, the universe would no longer be able to support life. And by ever so slightly, I mean a difference as small as 0.0000, another 45 zeros, and a 1 at the end. Of all the possible values this cosmological constant theoretically could have had, it just happened to be a life-permitting one, seemingly against all odds. And this is the same for every fundamental aspect of our universe. The values for each of these fundamental rules all fall within a razor-thin range that is life-permitting. It seems this cannot have happened due to chance. You can attribute some things to luck, but when the odds look like 1 in a trillion, you have to look for some kind of explanation. So this fact that our universe seems to be finely tuned for life leaves us with one question. Why? What is the cause for this fine-tuning? Well, perhaps the constants had to be this way. What if fine-tuning is a result of deeper, undiscovered laws of physics that make it necessary for the fundamental constants to be the way they are? In other words, maybe there was no other way for the universe to be. Perhaps the odds were in our favour after all. Okay, but even if there was a deeper set of fundamental laws, it seems like it still wouldn't really change the fact the universe could be considered fine-tuned. Why? Because it would only push the same question back one step. In other words, the deeper laws could have been different and made a set of life-prohibiting constants instead. So why didn't they? It would only make it a question of the fine-tuning of the natural laws of the universe rather than the fine-tuning of the constants of the universe. And on top of that, there's no evidence of any kind of deeper theory of physics, and it doesn't seem physics is trending in the direction of us doing away with these unexplained constants, as said by Luke A. Barnes, the co-author of the excellent book, A Fortunate Universe. Okay, so maybe that idea doesn't work. Luckily for us, there are better theories, and one of the best possible explanations is known as the multiverse theory. This is the idea that our universe is just one of many other universes. And it's a theory that's gained traction among physicists in recent decades. For example, some physicists subscribe to the idea of string theory, which states the universe consists of tiny one-dimensional strings. And among these string theorists, some suggest the idea of what is called a string landscape. This theory suggests there could be a huge number of universes other than our own. There's also another idea called internal inflation that suggests there could be other universes so far away from ours that we're unable to detect them. So maybe there's lots of other universes, but still, wouldn't they need to be fine-tuned as well? Well, maybe not. Some theorize that each of these alternate universes could have its own set of constants and physical laws. And if this was the case, it would certainly seem a good explanation for our fine-tuning. I mean, if there were trillions and trillions of universes, chances are at least a couple would end up falling within the life-permitting range. But there are some big problems with this explanation, and I'll focus on the three main ones. First of all, the multiverse theory is very controversial, and critics often refer to it being closer to science fiction than real physics. This is because not only is there no empirical evidence for it, but it's also built upon specific theories of physics that are increasingly considered to be unlikely in the scientific community. For example, the string landscape theory for the multiverse can only be considered a possibility if string theory is shown to be true. And string theory is increasingly considered unlikely to be true by physicists, who often describe it as a mathematical tool or a speculative dream. And there are similar issues with the eternal inflation multiverse theory as well. If any of the unproven theories that the multiverse idea is built upon are ever shown to be false, the multiverse hypothesis will collapse with them. The truth is, these ideas of a multiverse stand on somewhat shaky and unproven ground. They're considered to be interesting ideas at the best of times, and science fiction at the worst of times. On top of this, the single biggest objection to claims that the multiverse explains fine-tuning is that even if there was a multiverse, this would only push the question back one step, and leave us asking why the multiverse is fine-tuned for life. In other words, to explain fine-tuning by appealing to a multiverse, you must assume even more fine-tuned physics. Why? Because it seems a multiverse that can create life-permitting universes would need to be finely tuned in order to do so. In their book, A Fortunate Universe, co-authors Lewis and Barnes argue that in order to have this life-permitting multiverse, the laws of physics must be finely tuned to create a universe-generating mechanism, to have laws of physics that allow constants to vary between universes, and to have initial conditions fine-tuned so that the multiverse can emerge at all. So while the multiverse theory remains a serious possibility, it clearly has some issues, and even if it was true, many argue that it still wouldn't solve the fine-tuning issue, as it seems the multiverse may have to be finely tuned itself. So what else could possibly explain this fine-tuning of the universe? Well, the explanations are typically threefold: chance, necessity, or design. I think most would agree that we can reasonably dismiss the idea that fine-tuning occurred due to chance alone. The odds of that seem far too small. And we've examined the main arguments that the universe simply had to be this way, such as deeper laws that necessitate it, or the multiverse. While they are interesting ideas, they don't seem to fully answer the question of fine-tuning. So perhaps the explanation for our finely tuned universe comes from a designer. Maybe our universe has some kind of purpose, and it was made to support life. After all, it does seem like the extreme precision of our laws of physics and the impossibly small odds of them falling within the narrow life-permitting range call out for some kind of designer. It seems that a god that created the universe and wanted for it to be life-permitting is a very reasonable explanation for this fine-tuning, and an explanation that cannot be easily dismissed. Even prominent atheist physicists, like the astrophysicist Geraint Lewis, argue that a designer being the explanation for our universe's fine-tuning is a serious theory that warrants careful consideration. And importantly, this argument is not tied to any particular religion. It's simply suggesting that an intelligent, purposeful cause could account for the remarkable precision we see in the cosmos. Philosophers and physicists alike take this as a serious explanation, and it's certainly one of the arguments for God people find the hardest to critique. This is the God hypothesis, and people find it especially convincing not just because it explains the universe's fine-tuning, but because it also acts as an explanation for many other things too. It can explain both the existence of our universe and explain why it has the exact properties required for life simultaneously. I won't get into the other arguments for God in this video, such as the cosmological argument, but when the fine-tuning argument for God is combined with these arguments, it makes for an especially convincing case. In my opinion, while the God explanation for fine-tuning exists beyond the realm of science, and therefore cannot be tested or empirically proven, it seems both logically and philosophically a highly convincing and rational explanation. To me, it seems a belief in God is justified when you take all the evidence into consideration. But regardless of what you think, we can at least agree that if the universe didn't have to be this way, and yet it is, this must be one of the deepest clues about our reality we've ever discovered. So what do you think the best explanation for fine-tuning is? Is there anything I said you disagree with? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed, please do leave a like and subscribe. Until the next one, bye-bye.